Hey, wait a second for the clock to pop up here. Alright, we have officially begun here. Great. We have a solid page of the outcome of Gideon. It's really not too long compared to some of the things that we've gone over. I'll make it quick. But before we get into the topic of today, which I discussed in my introduction video, is the outcome of Gideon and his family, right? The outcome of Gideon. Before I get into something real quick, I just want to mention once more the importance of why I'm doing this, why it's important, at least to me, and then that can translate to you as well. Like we read the Quran, right? We went through it pretty thoroughly from my understanding. Another thing about the Quran, there's not a lot of narrative in the Quran. It exists in here, but in very small portions, and it's easier to break down. So I like the fact that I can open up the Quran and get a generalized message. I want to get to that point with the Bible, but what I've done in the past, or I found even when I would try to just open the Bible and read a message, it would oftentimes fall in line with a narrative, and I would have no idea what's going on. So that's my fault of my own, right? But this is helping to establish familiarity with each of the narratives in the Bible, so I can read a verse and actually understand the context of what it's saying, therefore better apply it to my life and what's going on in my life. Because before I would open it and I would be in the middle of a battle and I had no idea what battle or with whom. I had no idea what the Lord was trying to tell me. So with going through the Bible really with a fine-tooth comb like we're becoming familiar with each of the books, so we're aware with what's going on in each of the books. Therefore, when you go later to look for guidance within the Word, within the Bible, you can think and remember these stories and these narratives, and you can know exactly what is going on each time you reference the text and the Bible. So I saw something recently where it's like, people like to read the Bible and take notes and really break it down, but really it should be the Spirit telling you what's going on. Well, yes, that's true, and yes, every time I did open in the middle of a narrative, I can always find correlations and ways to tie it to myself with the help of the Spirit. But just being who I am, and I'm sure many of you are this way as well, it helps to have some background and know the history, the actual history behind it, and what led up to certain things and certain events. Those who are really adept at the Bible and maybe have read it several times might already know this. That's why they kind of bash on people that are really breaking things down. But for me, I have not read the book straight through. We've talked about this before. I've read bits and pieces. I'm familiar with the text itself. But as far as the Old Testament, breaking down the small, skipped over narratives in the New Testament, anything outside of the gospel is really foreign to me and is really unfamiliar. So just a side note, that's why we're doing what we're doing. I think it's really going to benefit us later when the Word can provide a comfort to us and we can reference it with all things, just having this background in line. So without further ado, let's get into a quote and let's get into part 6 of Judges so we find out what's happening with Gideon and his family. And the quote for today is also by Hilary Belloc, the poet. It says, towards the age of 26, they shoved him into politics. One more time. This is a snippet from a poem. I'm not going to read the whole poem. I was going to, but I forgot to Google it. But it says, towards the age of 26, they shoved him into politics. So we might know Gideon was maybe younger, or on the younger side, when he was called to action by the Lord. But this is not necessarily going to be just about Gideon. This is going to be about Gideon's family and his sons that then are called to action at an even younger age. The ages disclosed are not too specific, but it definitely implies, or the word implies that they definitely were younger when being called into action. We are going to talk about Gideon's youngest son and some other young gentlemen, really the sons of the leaders of the generation before, that are now stepping up to the plate. The outcome is not going to be all rainbows and butterflies, as we will read, but this is just to draw that quote into this text. It's about young leadership stepping up to the plate. So we have here, chapter 22. The Israelites said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian." But Gideon told them, "I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." And he said, "I do have one request, that each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder." So, pausing real quick, they're trying to shove Gideon and his children and his grandson into politics, exactly what the quote had said. So he's saying that's not going to happen. Politics cause a lot of drama, as we will soon learn. The only ruler they should have is the Lord. But he's asking them, give me some plunder, you can compensate me for this effort. Gideon made the gold into a ephod, which he placed in Ophrah, his town. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshipping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. So he made an ephod, which we know now as the breast piece, right, for a priest to wear or what have you, just like a wearable garment. He made this, right? He made this here, and the Israelites started to worship the idol, essentially. They treated that thing as an idol, since Gideon would not step up to the plate to be a physical leader, and the Lord, right, not in his physical nature from what the Israelites can see. They're looking to other things, right? Even though they are trying to, maybe it's almost like a monument, right? We have these like monuments put up after war or something like that. It's kind of like that. They're trying to look towards something to remind themselves of the good that the Lord, or really Gideon, has done, right? They're taking kind of the Lord out of it, and they're trying to praise Gideon and worship Gideon with this. There's no talk of whether Gideon was dismayed at this or if he tried to stop them, but we just know that it became actually a snare to Gideon and his family. It says, "No sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals. They set up Baal-Berith as their god, and did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. They also failed to show any loyalty to the family of Jerub-Baal, that is Gideon, in spite of all the good things he had done for them." So after Gideon died and he told them that his sons were not going to rule, they just, fell off completely forgot. It almost seems like to no fault of their own, because we use terms like they forgot or they failed to remember. It seems like it was like a subconscious decision. It wasn't really of their own doing. But it is a shame. Then we go on to Abimelek. And Abimelek sounds familiar because it is a generalized term for a king of this time. But there was the son of Jerub-Baal, which is Gideon, right? He's called Jerub-Baal because he destroyed the Baal altar of his father. That's why they called him that. But it says here, Abimelek, son of Jerub-Baal, his name was Abimelek. Alright, just clear. Went to his mother's brothers in Shechem And he said to them and to all his mother's clan, "Ask all the citizens in Shechem, which is better for you, to have all 70 of Jerub-Baal's sons rule over you, or just one man? Remember, I am your flesh and blood." So here we go. For some reason, right, we have one of the sons, his name is Abimelek, so maybe that was to the fault of his parents, right? One of the sons is trying to step up and rule over the people of Shechem. And like I had mentioned in the introduction, Jerub-Baal, or Gideon, had 70 children, approximately 70 children. So just remember that. So yes, we have Abimelek, named correctly, trying to step up and lord over these people. It says, he went to his father's home in Ophrah, and on one stone murdered his 70 brothers, the sons of Jerub-Baal. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerub-Baal, escaped by hiding. So he actually had ill intent, malicious intent. You know, there were some back and forth, and people were being stirred up about his interjection to want to rule. And he actually riled some individuals up to help him murder all of the rest of his family, which is really upsetting. And I take this back, right? It's 70 brothers, not 70 children. So that was just the male side, was 70. So Gideon really got busy, especially within the 40 years of peace that they had in the Israelite community. They really got busy. So 7 males altogether. Females we don't know about, okay? Sacredly protected. But yes, son of Jerub-Baal. And then Jotham, the youngest of Jerub-Baal's sons, escaped. It says, when Jotham was told about this, he climbed on the top of Mount Gerizim and shouted to them, "Listen to me, citizens of Shechem, so that God may listen to you. Remember that my father fought for you and risked his life to rescue you from the hand of Midian. So they actually crowned Abimelek as king, and Jotham heard about it. He decided to speak up and stir against this crowning, because it was not just. I mean, we talk about, right, the difference between killing and murder. This was most definitely a premeditated, violent, and unjust murder of these people. So, of course, the one who escapes is going to speak up against this nature that is being instilled between Abimelek and the people. He speaks up against it, and he ultimately curses everybody who's following this path. He curses them, and he's like, remember, it was my father too that saved you. So listen to me. This is not going to be a good outcome for you guys if you continue with this path. But it says here, then Jotham fled, escaping to Beer, and he lived there because he was afraid of his brother Abimelek. So we don't really hear much about Jotham throughout this book. But something that is interesting is there is another king that comes about later in Chronicles named Jotham. And if you could guess what age he started to rule, was around 26 or 25 years old. So interesting how our quote mentioned that. It's not the same Jotham in this context, but we can maybe draw some sort of parallel. There is power in being named after somebody, or being named the same name as somebody from the past. There is a certain spiritual connection and power in that, and he ends up being king at age 25. But it's sometime later, so it's hard to draw that linear line. But we have here, now we have Gaal, son of Ebed, move with his clan into Shechem, and its citizens put their confidence in them. After they had gone into the fields and gathered the grapes and trodden them, they held a festival in the temple of their God. While they were eating and drinking, they cursed Abimelek. So after Jotham had fled, the people actually had kind of some ill feelings against Abimelek already, and there was about 3 years where Abimelek ruled, and it was just unrest. There was unrest, and people didn't really like Abimelek. Like, their view of him and his perspective, their perspective of him had changed. So now we have Gaal, son of Ebed, move into the town, and they're all working class people, right? But he became sort of a leader, a young leader once again. He became somewhat of a popular leader, and people listened to him, and he worked with them, and they all end up kind of cursing Abimelek and talking trash, if you will. Of course, one of Abimelek's consorts heard about this, and it says that he kind of started going after Gaal. So it says, but Gaal spoke up again. Look, people are coming down from the central hill, and a company is coming from the direction of the diviner's tree. So now he realizes after some time that this blew over. They were gathered together again, and the army or whomever of Abimelek starts to come after them. It says, on hearing this, the citizens in the tower of Shechem went into the stronghold of the temple of El-Berith. And when Abimelek heard that they had assembled there, they piled them up against the stronghold. They had some branches. They didn't clarify that, but there were some branches. They had piled up the branches against the stronghold and set it on fire with the people still inside. So all the people in the tower of Shechem, about 1,000 men and women, also died. God also made the people of Shechem pay for their wickedness. The curse of Jotham, son of Jerub-Baal, came on them. So really, in the perspective of the Bible, it was the words that Jerub-Baal spoke, that Jotham spoke against the people taking Abimelek as their king. Jotham just ran off. He didn't want anything to do with it. Plus, during this whole time, we have Gaal and the son of Ebed. They're all still worshiping the other god. They're worshiping Baal-Berith or El-Berith. So they're worshiping the other god. So God was like, there's really no winning situation. Before the people had died in the tower, or after they were being burnt in the tower, we had some people, I guess, in the surrounding area gang up on Abimelek, and they killed Abimelek. Another woman, right, actually took a stone to his head and cracked it on his skull. And a soldier saw this or something like that and said, oh no, we can't have him die by the hand of a woman. So they ended up driving a sword into Abimelek as well to not make it seem like he died with a woman's hand. So Abimelek died. The people of Shechem also paid their price, but it's saying here it was due to their own wickedness and the vocalization of Jotham, the son of Jerub-Baal, who was, expressly upset with their behavior. I told you guys, it's a whirlwind and a half. But that is the story. I mean, we finished Gideon, so we're going to move on from Gideon and his children. But that was that time frame, right? We had, after Gideon, around 40 years of peace, and then we went into his children where, it became a mess once again after Gideon's death. So that's it, you guys. That's all I have to say about this. I hope you are understanding of the narrative a little bit better. And of course, if things are unclear, you can go and read. I feel as though it can be almost just as confusing when going and reading, because there is so much more detail and can tend to get a little bit lost in the text. At least that's what happens to me. So it's good to be able to really read and break things down and put the pieces together. I think it just helps overall. But I hope you enjoyed listening, and thank you for watching the whole thing. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.